You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Brandy Scott.
Thanks for tuning into Author Stories. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Be sure to go to hankgarner.com and subscribe to the show. No matter how you listen, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Pandora, Spotify, or YouTube, you can subscribe to the show and never miss an episode. I'd like to thank some sponsors today. Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experiences. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be a part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques. Learn from a vast collection of free writing resources. Make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one? Join Scribophile today at scribophile.community. For the Words is a unique writing motivator unlike anything I've seen. For the Words is an online writing platform which motivates writers of all backgrounds to increase their word count through gamification. Writing can be challenging, especially when you need to consistently produce a high output of words. By injecting a little fun into the routine and using daily rewards to promote a healthy writing habit, For the Words makes it easier to reach that word count. We're a community of bloggers, professional authors, college and high school students, research scientists, gamers, and first-time writers from all over the world. Come for the words, stay for the fun. Go to 4, that's the number 4, thewords.com. Both Sides of the Law, the Casper Halliday NYPD series, Book 1 by Nathan Roden. He shared his father's dream of becoming a detective. A prison sentence was not part of his plan. Casper Halliday's dream began to unravel 2 months before his 16th birthday. His father, Bobby, resigned from the NYPD after 15 years without an explanation. Casper's parents fought. Sirens closed in on their home from every direction. The sound that had always been a source of comfort now brought only humiliation. Bobby Halliday moved out. Casper's dream dissolved into a daily fight for survival. All he wanted now was to finish high school so he could ease his mother's burden. On his 17th birthday, in the throes of depression, Casper made a bad decision. That decision brought him face to face with one of the most dangerous men in the city. In Casper's world, there is laughter and there are tears. There's light and there's bitter darkness. There are improbable friends and unspeakable enemies. The Casper Halliday NYPD series launches with the most unlikely of beginnings. Read Both Sides of the Law today. The ebook edition includes a sneak peek of Ghost Man, Book 2 in the series. Writers, the internet is one of the best tools for research and creativity. It can also be one of the biggest hindrances to productivity, distracting you from doing the seat-in-the-chair, hand-on-keyboard work. Rescue Time gives you an accurate picture of how you spend your time to help you become more productive every single day. Spot inefficiencies in your day and become better at managing your time. Create a goal like spending less than 1 hour per day on email to help you stay focused. Set an alarm to tell you when you spent more than 2 hours on Facebook. Try Rescue Time and use our special discount code for 30% off a Rescue Time premium account by going to rescuetime.com/authorstories. Let us help you rescue your time. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Brandy Scott on the show with me today. Brandy has a fantastic new book. It's called Not Bad People, and this is a summer Thrill ride, I'll tell you. This has been a really enjoyable book for me to read, and I think you guys are really going to love it too. Welcome to the show, Brandy.
Thank you.
Brandy, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Do you know, my first memory isn't actually my memory. It is my grandmother's.
Intriguing.
Who used to tell a story, because she is no longer with us, but she used to tell a story about how when I was about 4, she took me to the Wanganui Public Library in New Zealand where we were living, and there was a woman typing. This would have been the early 80s. The woman was the librarian, and she was typing, and I said to her, "Are you writing a book?" Which is not a bad assessment for a 4-year-old in a library.
Right.
And she obviously humoured me, and apparently she turned around and said, yes, I'm writing a book. And my grandmother liked to say that I told her that that's what I was going to do when I grew up.
Oh, that's amazing. Did your grandmother remind you of that as you grew older?
Yes. I mean, she didn't, unfortunately. Unfortunately, she died before I wrote Not Bad People. But it's a story that now, my mum tells, my grandmother told it for years. So it's part of family history.
I love that. Were you a big reader as a kid?
Huge. I ate books. I have all my life been a big book person. My university flatmates used to tease me that I liked books more than people.
Oh, I can relate to that in a lot of days. What were some of the first stories or series or authors that really connected with you and that, opened up your imagination?
Oh, when I was sort of 8 or 9, my babysitter had a huge stack of Trixie Beldens and Nancy Drews, and I used to love being at her place because I used to read those. Through school, we had the Scholastic book delivery service. I don't know if you have it in the US, where you place an order and the books turn up, and it's just excitement. And I used to read all the series on that. I went through the Babysitters Club books when I was an intermediate, which I think is your middle school. I basically just read everything I could get my hands on. I can remember the first adult book I read, though, which was my dad's, and it was a Stephen King, and it was Needful Things. And I would have been about 13. And I just remember reading this book and being completely blown away by how big it was and how big the world was that it encapsulated. And I think it was my first realization that you could write something, or that people wrote things that were that all-encompassing. And it's funny because I can still see that multi-character story, I write a lot about things, I write a lot about possessions, and I have wondered before whether I could trace it all back to reading that Stephen King.
That is so fascinating. One thing that I love about Stephen King and talking about the big world and the bigness of everything is that he has this real talent for introducing characters and places and just making it feel mundane. It's like a place that you could be in, and these kind of odd characters pop in, which keeps you intrigued, about the people in the place. And then just about the time that you're comfortable in this place, he, unleashes the hellhounds or something, it really turns everything upside down. That's what I love about that. And and I love to trace people's early influences because, in reading your book, these are characters, that I feel like I could know, it's a real gift to make the reader feel comfortable right away.
Well, that's probably the biggest compliment that a writer could get. I mean, it's funny. There's a lot of Stephen King that I haven't read or that I've had to put down. I scare easily. Like, I don't go and see films that are above a PG-13 without someone to hide in their shirt while I'm watching them. So there's a lot of Stephen King that, quite frankly, just petrifies me. But my other favourite is probably Under the Dome. And again, there's so much that I love about that I can see come through in the writing that I do. And again, it's the third person shift of viewpoints. It's the multi-character stories. It's the small townness, the claustrophobia. Well, in Under the Dome, literal claustrophobia, but of the small town and the mundaneness of. Do you know what? I love Stephen King because people have jobs. In a lot of books, people don't really have jobs. And my day job is that I am a business and an economic journalist. I work on the radio, and so I talk to people all day about their jobs. And I find it fascinating because we spend so much of our lives at work. And so I feel like it has to be an important part of storytelling. If that's what you're spending 8 hours a day doing, it's influencing you. Exactly.
Did you ever did you exercise writing like in school, or when did the going from your 4-year-old announcement that this is what you're going to do to actually starting to work on the craft? When did you start to tell stories of your own?
I won a short story competition when I was about 7. That was a one-off. I can remember the first. Actually, it wasn't even a story. I wrote a soap opera when I was about 12, and I can remember being praised for it by a Mr. Mackenzie, who was my teacher, and being quite surprised by that because I didn't particularly think that there was anything surprising about sitting down and doing that, and yet he acted as though there was. But in terms of actually proper writing, like seriously sitting down and writing, I mean, I've been a journalist all my working life, and like most journalists, I got into journalism because I liked words and I liked writing and I liked creating stories. And I went into print journalism first off, and the funny thing about that is I never wrote for myself once I started because I was writing for magazines and newspapers. And I don't think there was a lot left over, to be honest. But if you follow the whole kind of Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, I do think that's, where I got that's where I learned to write. That's where I kind of clocked up my hours in apprenticeship of just appreciating how stories hung together and what makes a paragraph sound right and all the rest of it. I took a writing course. I went to the Summer Writers Workshop in Iowa about 5 or 6 years ago, their summer festival program, because I'd broken up with a boyfriend, actually, and we were supposed to go on holiday together, and we clearly were not going to Sri Lanka together. And faced with sitting, I'm based in Dubai, I work in the Middle East, so faced with spending a 50-degree July moping on my own in the summer heat here, I went and enrolled for some summer courses in Iowa because I thought, it would distract me and it would keep me busy and I wouldn't be thinking about him, which totally worked. And 2 fantastic things came out of that. First of all, I sat in a class next to this woman who was far and away the best writer in the class. And I remember thinking, I either have to befriend you or kill you. And I befriended her, and I am now godmother to her 2 children, and she is my first reader, and I am her first reader. And she is my closest sort of writing friend, and a writing ally is a gift. And the second thing is that was the first time that I actually thought I could do this. Do you know what I mean? Like I there is a chance that I could actually write something that looked and felt and smelt like a book.
That is amazing. I have talked to a lot of writers who either started as journalists or still are journalists like you. And I'm kind of fascinated by the intersection of those 2 things and how one feeds the other. It would seem to me that there are some great tools that you pick up as a journalist that help you as a fiction writer. The ability to look at the same scene as 100 other people, but come out with a unique story from that, and to see the things that other people don't see. Or in the midst of conversation, in doing radio journalism, listening for maybe the question that's unsaid, or the thing that is left off just before the real answer. There's little things that you pick up on. You tune into people more than people that are not maybe doing that job every day. But like you said, a lot of journalists get caught in this trap of writing every day and presenting every day, and not actually doing the thing themselves anymore, because you're writing for someone else and all of this sort of thing. Looking back now, thank God you had that experience with that boyfriend, and it was the catalyst to kind of push you forward. It probably didn't seem like it at the time, but how do you know? How do you, when that started happening, and then when you had to integrate back into real life, along with your writing life, how do you balance those things and not get burned out from the writing and the presenting for someone else instead of working on your own thing?
It's tricky. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm a breakfast radio presenter, and I love my job deeply. But I do get up before dawn every weekday. And some days I write, and some days I am too knackered to write, to be honest. And my brain is just mush. Today, funny enough, was one of those days. Which is unfortunate, but it comes with the territory. But the pros of my job are that on a good day, because I work effectively in the mornings and the evenings, I broadcast in the morning and I prepare for the next day's show in the evening. On good days, I have this lovely stretch of time in the afternoon to write, which is great. I also talk to people all day and listen to people all day, like you said. And I think, you have to read to be a writer. There's no way around that one. But I think you also have to listen to people, and you have to talk to people to be a writer. I'm a big believer that you need to be in the world. And my job keeps me very much in the world and amongst a lot of people that I wouldn't necessarily encounter otherwise, having conversations with them. And it's funny, I can see, I didn't base the book on anyone I've interviewed, but I can also see where the things that we were discussing on the radio, I can just see where it's subtly influenced the book if I go through and read it carefully. And they're not big examples, and they wouldn't mean anything actually to anyone other than me. But I can see where I got quite obsessed with multi-level marketing schemes, for example. Or I can see where I'd heard about something happening and I've extrapolated from it, and that's kind of lent into something in the book. So, yeah, I'm really lucky. I come into contact with so many different people every day.
I'm so glad you said. I say that all the time. That people say there are two rules to being a writer: read a lot and write a lot. And I'm just like you. I think you've got to get away from the computer and go talk to people. Sometimes people watch, have conversations, listen to the way people listen to the cadence of conversation. That'll do so much for your dialogue writing. But talking to people spurs ideas, and rarely is it a copy of what you've heard, but you need things to feed your imagination, and I'm glad that you see that as well. Let's talk about this new book. When did you start working on this book?
I started writing it. Well, I wrote the first chapter it would have been about 3 or 4 years ago. I went to a letting go ceremony. The beginning of the book, for anyone who hasn't read it, and I'm not giving anything away here, is 3 friends who are together on New Year's Eve, and they are having a letting go ceremony. They're writing down things on bits of paper that they want to let go of, and letting them float off into the air. And I went to a letting go ceremony. I was invited. I didn't know anyone there particularly well, funnily enough. I was invited along by a friend, and we all wrote down things that we wanted to be free of. Mothers-in-laws, cellulite, whatever, 15 pounds, I don't know. And we let the lanterns off. And I thought, as they floated away, what would happen if they hit something? Which they didn't. But that is where the idea of the book came from. And I wrote the first chapter actually quite quickly after that night. And then I didn't quite know what to do with it. I was playing around with different possibilities. I was playing around with the idea of a bushfire. I was playing around, but I'd read a couple of sort of bushfire-y books fairly recently. I was playing around with different ideas. And so I didn't do anything with it. And I actually went away and wrote something else. And then I came back to it about a year and a half later, and I knew.
Wow. Did you realize when you first started writing it that this was going to be a novel? Could you see the trajectory and think that okay, this is, that we're inundated by ideas all day long, and when people ask authors, where do your ideas come from? It's kind of an absurd question because they're everywhere. But there's a difference between those regular ideas and that kind of golden idea where, okay, I can see that this is going to be a thing.
Do you know, I didn't think of it as one of those golden ideas. And I have loads of ideas. I mean, I have a file that I keep on my laptop that I just write down different ideas. And a lot of them I've actually written synopsises for because I write the synopsis first, strangely. And this, I kind of thought, I don't really know how it ends. And I think the end would have to end with some kind of hearing or something, and that would be really boring. And I didn't know how it ended. And funnily enough, I didn't sell the book. My agent sold the book without me knowing how it ended. I'd written a whole other book. I did a creative writing master's. I took a year off work. I went back to New Zealand, which is where I'm from, and I did a creative writing master's in Wellington. And I wrote a completely different book for that won a prize and ended up getting me an agent. And she'd started showing it around, and it was set in New Zealand. And as she was showing it around, she said to me, is there anything else that you're working on? Because, publishers like to see that there's a pipeline, that you have more than one idea. And I said, I've got something else, but I've only written 2 or 3 chapters of it. And so I sent her the first, it would have been about 8,000 words, I think, of Not Bad People. And she sold it. Not the one I'd conveniently written, but the one I hadn't written.
Oh, mercy. So were you were obviously surprised that it happened that way. When it sold and now you're like, oh goodness, now what am I going to do? How do you start moving forward with the book?
I did have a very short period of you couldn't have sold the book I'd already written, but I can also see. I mean, if you think, hopefully we get better with each book, right? I mean, so I can totally see why Not Bad People, even just from the first couple of chapters, I can see why it sold and my other book didn't, because it just had so much more in the way of stakes. It just had so much more in the way of risk for all of the characters. And the first one didn't, which I think is quite a common first book sort of mistake, if you like. So I could see that quite quickly. And I made a conscious decision, and I'm not really this kind of person, to be honest. I'm the sort of person who thinks, what could go wrong here? Which is great for making up plots, by the way. If you look at every situation in your life in terms of what could go wrong here with a slightly anxious brain, plots will unfold from the sidewalk. I mean, that's how the whole lantern plot for Not Bad People came about. I took a perfectly normal situation and thought, what if it all ended in disaster? And that's where the book comes from. But I made a conscious decision that I was going to view the fact that HarperCollins had bought this book that was 8,000 words old, and I didn't know how it ended. I didn't even really know what happened in the middle. And I thought, I am going to look at that as not as a scary thing, but I'm going to look at that as a fabulous thing that I know someone wants this book at the end. So the vast majority of books are written, and over years, and you don't even know if anyone is ever going to want the thing. So the fact that I was writing something and I knew that it had a home, I just thought, I'm going to look at that as a huge, reassuring positive. And Catherine Milne, who was the head of fiction at HarperCollins in Australia, phoned me and said, how do you want to play this? Do you want to send me something every couple of chapters? Do you want to only show me at the end? Do you, and I thought, what an amazing safety net that I can effectively get feedback from the head of fiction at HarperCollins while I'm writing. And I just decided that I also was going to look at that as not, slightly daunting, but as just the most amazing gift going. And we decided, what we actually did in the end was I sent it to her halfway through to check, is this on the right track? And she said yes. And I kept going, and then I sent it to her at the end. So she saw it twice. But we did have lunch about halfway through when I still didn't know how it ended. And I can remember I was in Australia. I had this wonderful month where I just drove around country Victoria on this big research trip, which was fabulous. And I met Catherine for lunch, and I just sat there the whole time thinking, please don't ask me how it ends. Please don't ask me how it ends. Please don't ask me how it ends. Which she didn't. Nobody did. Not my agent, not the publicity people, not a single person.
Wow. You didn't know how the book was going to end until you got to the end. But you're the kind of writer, you said, who writes out a synopsis from the beginning. How do you merge those two, where you're not an outliner per se, or at least on this book you weren't, but in the beginning you kind of have a feel for how the story's going to go. How do you merge those two writing styles? When
I say synopsis, it's a synopsis, but it doesn't have. It's not a synopsis, as in it doesn't list every single thing that happens, and it doesn't include the ending. I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm one chapter in, and I have sat down at the beginning. I gave it a title. I gave it what I would call a stand first, coming from a newspaper background, but I think they call them shout lines or something in the book world. But the sort of grabby lines that are on the front and on the back, because I like writing those.
So you're writing a hook that will intrigue the reader and hopefully intrigue you enough to want to go through that, because the writer is the first reader. Obviously.
Yes, exactly. And those, I find those lines kind of outline the main question that the book is asking. And I write a sort of a 3 or 4 paragraph. Is probably, to be fair, it's probably an extended back of the book blurb. And in fact, the back of the book blurb for Not Bad People in both Australia and America is very, very, very similar to that original document that I wrote before I wrote the bok. I mean, I've tweaked it as I've gone along, but it's in that kind of style. It's in a very salesy style. And I mean, I work for a commercial radio station. I'm always thinking about how you pitch a story to an audience so that it's the most engaging. And that probably is actually one of my favorite bits of the entire process, because once I've got that, you know that what you're writing has a rough shape, and you know it has stakes, which again, for commercial fiction, which is what I write. I mean, commercial fiction in some people's books is a dirty word. In mine, it is not. It just means that people might want to pick this thing up and read it.
Which is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should never be a dirty thing.
No. And I like doing it, because I like to see if I can make it hooky and grabby and attention, then it gets me excited about the book.
Right. Exactly. The title is provocative, Not Bad People, and even the bad is in italics. And I love that the setup of this book, they're just friends, they're just normal people, and here we go, kind of going back to that theme again, who do something that they think nothing about. It's part of a celebration. And then they realize that there might be consequences to our actions, even the actions that we just, do that are completely innocent, and you play with that theme throughout the book, and you play with the idea of the hidden things, and that we are normal people, and sometimes we do things that we're not proud of, and then there's fallout and consequences. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes things just stay tucked away. As you're writing this, were those themes prominent in your mind, or is this just how the characters started going through the story?
They're the kind of characters that I like reading about, and it's the element of human nature, I think, that most interests me, which is that, no one is wholly good and no one is wholly bad unless they're a Disney character. And not even then. But I'm really interested in how people behave, not when you've got a decision that's like, will you do the good thing or will you do the bad thing? But most of the decisions that are, dilemmas, are where you've got two options and you're really choosing the lesser of two evils. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no good answer. And those are the moments that I find the most interesting.
Right. The book is out everywhere now in paperback and Kindle edition for ebook readers and audiobook edition. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on now, Brandy?
Yeah, I can. Funnily enough, yesterday, I've just booked flights back to Australia. I'm over about twice a year for another sort of 3.5 weeks. I'm writing something that is it's a bit more family than friends relations. And I've realized that everything I write has a financial base. There's quite a strong financial base to Not Bad People, I think, because the three characters, whether they realize it or not, are where they all sit financially influences their relationship. And I talk to people about money all day long because I have a business show on the radio. And this is about money dynamics in families. If some of you are doing better than others, what do we expect from the people who are doing better than us?
Family and money, two explosive topics jammed together.
As Grace Paley said, all books or all stories should contain two things: blood and money.
That's right. That's right. Brandy, if people are just learning about you and want to find out more about what you do and maybe follow along for news coming up, is there any place online that they can connect with you?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram. I think I'm Hey Brandy Scott. I deliberately don't live on social media because otherwise there would be no writing, which is why I've had to think about what the handle is, but I'm pretty sure that it's Hey Brandy Scott. And I like Instagram a lot. I've also got a Facebook author page, which if you type in Brandy Scott author, you will find it.
Yep. And all the good vibes are over on Instagram for sure. So we'll put links to those in the show notes, and we'll put a link to the book as well. Brandy, I love this book. I love what you're doing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because I didn't really think of writing for male readers. And so it's so great to hear you say, it has a plane crash in it, so it's not,
right.
No one's calling it chick lit.
Right.
But as a bloke, how did you find reading it? Did you feel like you were reading a women's book? What bits sort of dragged you in and what bits lost you?
I think I have the gift to not be worried about genre so much. I have an older sister who handed me down all of her girl mystery books and things when I was a kid, and the Trixie Beldens and all of that, and Nancy Drew. And I just don't get caught up in that stuff. It's a fascinating story to me, and I love the tension, the interpersonal tension, and the slightly thriller aspects of it. I just I hate that we designate some things as chick lit, and I just don't get caught up in that.
Which is interesting and really, really lovely to hear. I mean, it's constantly pointed out on Twitter that there's no section in the bookshop that says, men's fiction.
Right. Exactly.
And I read widely and wildly. I always have. But it's nice to know that you can read it without feeling like you're reading a woman's book.
Right. And I didn't even think of it in those terms, really until I guess I was looking on Amazon and I saw something about women's fiction. And I just always think that's odd. Like, why do we have women's and men's fiction? I live with a wife and 3 daughters. We don't have women's and men's ketchup in the fridge. It's so weird. But anyway, but yeah, we're going to send everybody to see you and pick up their copy of Not Bad People. Brandy, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe at hankgarner.com or on your favorite podcasting app. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
I'm melting, cried Joey. Take the picture already. He stood with one arm around the bronze waist of the bewitched tribute statue, Samantha Stevens, riding a broom across a crescent moon. Jason tried in vain to frame the shot without any tourists in it, but that was impossible. From all points of the compass, a merry horde had arrived for Salem's 2-day summer psychic fair. All the commuter trains had burst open, like cornucopias filled beyond capacity, spilling endless fruits and nuts onto the red brick sidewalks of Essex Street. A vampiress in lavender shorts and feathered boots sold maple chocolate walnut fudge in front of the Witch City tattoo parlor. A near-naked gypsy in purple-green veils danced with a pheasant in her arms around a plug-in Hanukkah menorah. A fat man in a fetching blue jeans dress sold amethyst and citrine charm bracelets in front of Medusa Cafe, but his stand got knocked over by a one-armed crone driving a mobility scooter who sang "Choo-choo" as she passed, her stump on the wheel, her lipstick ghastly, her gnarled right hand raised in trailing plumes of noxious cigarette smoke. Chewbacca leapt out of her way and slapped sparks from his fur. He gave a disgruntled growl before going back to playing Summer Lovin' on his ukulele. The old one-armed dervish drove off, choo-choo, parting a crowd of wanderers, slack-jawed tourists with camera straps tight across their bellies, yellow-vested police on segways, elderly rollerbladers, face-painted infants and harried parents, and college girls. So many hot, hysterical college girls that you'd think somebody had napalmed a sorority house. Jason, are you deaf? Sorry. Jason raised the phone and took the shot. Joey inspected the photo and nodded in approval. Your turn. No, thanks. Do it, Shaggy. Don't make me hex you. Jason gave in and traded places. He put an arm around Samantha's metal back. Her bronze body had flushed in the afternoon sun, warm through his glove, but her eyes were weary. No, downright creepy. And her smile was forced, like a Disneyland princess who'd had her toe stomped. Say chowder, cried Joey, who'd been practicing his New England accent all morning. Come on, man. Say chowder. Fine, chowder. Joey got the shot, and Jason surrendered Samantha to a chubby kid wearing a Gandalf beard who climbed up to worship her bronze bosom.